Hi, and welcome into the Cool Grandpa podcast. This is our first podcast episode of 2025, and I'm very happy to have you here and join me for an important discussion with Lendo Mutambala. Now, Lendo is one of the founders of Super Daddy Club. Now, what Super Daddy Club is an organization that's starting to be created to really help support young fathers better themselves as fathers, as husbands, and as men. And part of what they're doing is building a network of resources that can be easily accessed by people that want to know, how do I get better sleep? How do I navigate family court systems? How do I just become a better leader in whatever profession they've chosen? So this is going to be a great conversation. You're going to love meeting Lendo. I had a blast getting to know him a little bit more. And so without further ado, hey, let's jump into this conversation. Hi, Lendo. Thank you for being on the Cool Grandpa podcast. I'm excited to sit down and talk with you about what maybe some of the needs of young fathers are that older fathers like myself can help provide.
Oh, thank you so much for having me on. It's a pleasure to be on your show. Great show, too.
Oh, well, thank you so much. This is a treat because we've been talking with people sometimes about what moms need recently, and then being able to pivot and talk about what do dads need, because a lot of times, you know how it is, guys, when you go, hey, how's it going? What's going on? It's fine. Everything's fine. And that goes for our sons too. And sometimes as dads, you know, when the kids are fibbing or stretching the truth. But this will be a good way for us to get connected, learn more about you. And like I said, how we can help support dads, because, you know, if dads don't get the support they need, that affects our grandkids.
It absolutely does.
Now, I'd love for you to introduce yourself to us and talk to us about your background and where you came from, where you grew up, and what you're doing now.
Yeah, absolutely. So I initially, my life has been a bit of a long journey. I was born in Congo. My family immigrated to Canada. I was about 7 years old. We were in the process of immigrating. We left Congo because war broke out there and things were just getting really bad. So my mom had a long time plan of eventually coming to Canada. She just put it in action. And so I was very fortunate with that. So yeah, I come from a family of three, with my older brother, younger sister. We all came here, and initially we landed on the east side of Canada in Quebec City. Congo speaks French, so it was only natural for us to go to a French-speaking region. And so I spent maybe 4 years in Quebec City, and then we moved out east for better opportunities to Alberta, where I've been since I was 12 years old. Now I'm 33. So the vast majority of my life has been here in Canada on the west side of our country. When you know, it's interesting when you speak about the challenges of a young father, because for me, I did not know my father growing up. He stayed in Congo. Super Daddy Club has helped me reconnect, at least change my mindset to recognize the importance of me reconnecting with my father. So that's kind of like jumping ahead, but something that was, um, really helpful with the platform here. I personally became a young father by the age of 22, 23 about. And I don't know what my impetus was, but I always, just because we never had a father in the house, I was the one who always wanted to step into that role, right? And there is a statistics about growing up without, from a single parent home and the likelihood of you becoming a young parent yourself. But I guess I fall victim to a lot of statistics. So yeah, I became a father at the age of 22, 23. And I think at that time, you know, people always say that you can't be prepared to be a young parent, but yeah, I jumped right into it, and I was not as prepared as I could have been for sure, but I feel like I've made the best out of it. And that was always my goal, to just provide my son a different life than what was provided to me with less. And from everything that my mom had done already, I can say that, you know, that that objective was made a lot easier for us to be able to start in Canada, where there's so many more opportunities. I even think sometimes of what it would have meant for us to have started out in the United States versus Canada, and I'm happy that Canada was a place that we landed, just because the culture is, United States is like everything feels like it's on steroids compared to us. The culture is, and so um, for us, especially because we grew up in um, government housing for the most of our lives, and the conditions there are such that children go astray very early on, because a lot of us are fatherless. A lot of us come from single parent homes. A lot of us have immigrated to this country from regions where there's more instability. And so when you put all that together within a community, it becomes hard to get out of there with all your faculties, without being addicted, without, the odds are against you. And so you're kind of like spreading through that level of challenges. So yeah, I've always considered myself to be very fortunate throughout our journey, coming here, even becoming a father at a young stage. I ended up finding myself going through courts at a very early on. And even my outcome out of that, compared to a lot of other men, I consider myself to be very fortunate. Um, yeah, so that's a bit of my background. Today, well, I have now two sons that I love very much. The older is 9 years old. The younger one is just turned 2 years old a couple of days ago here. So we're just done celebrating that. I've been working as a paramedic for the last 10 years. Time flies, my God. And then I'm on my third year in university studying business with a little bit of science and some economics. So I'm almost done, at least my first degree there. Then we're also doing Super Daddy Club.
Wow. Wow. You've got a lot on your plate and working through quite a bit. I've got to ask you, coming from the Congo to Quebec, did you know how cold it was going to be?
No, I had no idea. I had no idea. The first winter, if I remember correctly, we came towards the end of summer. So we had a
Okay.
little bit of sun and then got right to business. And the thing about Quebec City, or at least the East Coast in general, is that when it's cold, it's cold. Like winters will get super cold, summers will get super hot. In Alberta, at least we get bits of summer seasons during winter time. So Quebec, when it got cold, it got really cold. And I remember my brother, my sister, and I, we went outside playing in the snow for the first time. We're doing snow angels. We're doing everything we've seen on TV. And give it an hour, we're right back inside. I've never messed with the cold again.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and then you went from Quebec, and then you went out to the Northern Rockies and Alberta and all of that. So I know that gets to be cold, and you'll sometimes get snow in May out there.
Yeah, yeah.
And
It's fascinating, the weather here. You never know what to wear. That's exactly what we're into right now, where you do not know whether you go out with a jacket or a sweater or, a t-shirt.
yeah, well, and down here in Georgia, we're back up into the upper 70s. So that would be, I think, in the low 20s for
Hmm.
you. And we're probably going to stay that way until about November, where it will get a little bit cooler. But we typically have about 2 weeks of winter, and then we're right back into spring temperatures coming back for us. So we don't get any of these snowstorms. We don't get any of this weather that you guys do.
That would have been a better landing spot for us.
Well, I was thinking when you were talking about the speaking French, like, well, you could have ended up in New Orleans, and that, you would have gotten by for sure in New Orleans with,
Hmm.
with the French for a little
Hmm.
while.
Although the French is
Yeah,
very
it,
different, because we speak Belgium French, and that was actually a challenge going to Quebec City because they speak Quebec or French. And I got used eventually to the language, but yeah, definitely different.
yeah, it's similar to all the different flavors of Spanish.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a cultural shift. It didn't take me long to pick up English, because that would have been my third language at that point. but adjusting to the French in Quebec, that took a little bit of time. Yeah, definitely.
Sure. Well, and probably like everybody else, you learn the swear words first.
Oh, yeah.
Now, Lendo, I would like to talk to you and find out what was driving you as a young father, a paramedic, a university student. What was driving you to start Super Daddy Club, and what is Super Daddy Club?
Yeah, Super Daddy Club is an information platform that brings on authors, researchers, and I would even say influencers and coaches in the parenting field to address various parenting dynamics. As of late, we've been also focusing more on the nutrition components, uh, really emphasizing the health element, and we have to separate physical health and mental health with their vocabulary, because I think those two things get jumbled up when we only focus on physical health primarily, or we've always. And so that's Super Daddy Club. Uh, when initially Super Daddy Club started, the idea was to create a platform that can provide men with resources and knowledge to be able to navigate the family court system. When I was 22, 23 years old, I found myself in a precarious situation that I had no idea how I got myself in there. But there's a lot of red flags that maybe I could have seen before, but just um you know, to say that 22 years old, I'm looking forward to being a father. 23, 24 years old, I'm finding myself in family court. It's like, whoa, what the hell happened, right? So there was a lot of, I would say postpartum depression came and played a really terrible role. There's a lot of lack of education and understanding on our part in regards to what we're dealing with. And so when I started finding myself in this situation within the family court, it took me honestly from 23 to 32 years old to fully wrap up the situation. I had it under control by the age of 28, I would say, 28, 29, but it took almost till 32 years old to fully wrap up that situation. And while I was going through that, if you think about the age of 23 to 32, like what are you doing as a young man? That's when you're going to university, hopefully about to graduate, about to set yourself up. Hopefully you've met your, significant other in the process, and what's next is establishing yourself within your career, start building your family, maybe save for a house. But all that time, resources, energy for me was dedicated towards one thing, which was keeping my son in my life. I understood the impact. And I mean, that's why thank you for sending me that report there with the search in general, where I understood the impact it would have on my child if he did not have the father figure within his life, especially because of the way they were trying to pull me out of his life. Um, and I just could not let that be. I will not live with myself. And so, yeah, I put all my resources, energy, and effort into fighting this fight. But at the same time, I was watching time pass by. I was watching my peers excel in life, move on through different stages that I saw myself moving through at even earlier points. And I did not want all of that to go in vain. I didn't want my struggle and everything that I learned to go in vain. And that's where we started off initially by saying, hey, well, at least myself, um, started by telling myself if there's any way I could impart this knowledge onto others and let them know how to navigate the system, that'll be really helpful, especially because I represented myself for the most part throughout the way. And I don't recommend that to many people. Get a lawyer if you find yourself in these situations. And I finally did get a lawyer who was really helpful, and I was very lucky to find that man. Um, um, and the other element too was while going through that, the persona of a super dad was something that would come back when I would take account of everything that I was managing, everything that I was doing, and keeping things afloat. It's like I needed a superhero cape or something, you know? And so it was almost like an alter ego of mine whenever things will get hard. And so um when I finally got in during that time too, it was difficult because I didn't have stable employment. I had to travel far out of town to establish myself into my profession as a paramedic, and you start far out of town in the rural region and then you work your way back up to the metropolitan. So, um, during that time, I was also upgrading my high school because I did not want to give up on my education. I wanted to go to university. I didn't want this thing to be the thing that came in the way of that. And so I was doing some upgrading. I was figuring out the core battle. I was not making too much money. And all of that culminated to a point where, yeah, I'd find myself in these situations where it's like I needed whatever strength I could, anything that could help me get through it, it was important to keep around. And so when I got into the city, I connected with this other paramedic who's Ryan Ball, who I co-produce the show with right now, and his brother Dave Ball. And Ryan had been working in sound since he was 11 years old, Dave in marketing and graphic design. And when I told him about the idea of Super Daddy Club, they looked at it from a different perspective, but they saw the importance of it. And they gravitated towards the idea. We came together and we made the show out of it. And so the stars aligned in a way that I could not imagine. But 2-3 years later, we're talking to people like yourselves. We're talking to all these individuals in the field who have also done a lot of work and see the value of what we're doing. And so it's helping me understand what it is that we've created, when it started from just a small little ideas or set of ideas and whatnot. So hopefully I didn't go too long, but that's essentially the inception of Super Daddy Club.
No, I love it. And, one of the things that strikes me, and I think we're in a little bit of a similar situation, is we're both on the younger side of where people normally talk about these things. I think with grandfathers and grandparenting space, a lot of times if you have men talking about it, they're typically later 60s, 70s, maybe even 80s. Haven't found a lot of people in their 50s that are new grandfathers that are out there talking about it. And at the same time, too, with fathers and with what young fathers are going through, typically that's going to be 40s, 50s, and onward. And so it's great getting, I don't know, the actual passion, the struggle that's not very far removed, and being able to share that with your audience and with other fathers. Because I think sometimes as we have a little bit of a distance, some of those things aren't quite as intense as they were like a year or two ago.
Mm-hmm.
It's really remarkable. And the fact that you chose for it to be a clearinghouse of information, that it's not just one part of being a father, because certainly listening to your podcast and the different people that you've had on there, you're talking about, how to protect children against sexual predators. You're talking about sleep. You're talking about all sorts of different topics that fathers need to be aware of. What do you think you've been learning, or what are some of the biggest lessons that you've learned since starting Super Daddy Club?
Yeah, no, thank you for that. The proximity component is very, very important. And when it comes to, again, people always say, I'm not ready to have a child. I'm not ready to be a parent, and what that really means. If I can just touch base on the proximity component and formally answer your question, I feel like I was the closest to as little prepared as you can be for a lot of people with all the challenges that I came on, you know, uh, from my teenage years to early adulthood and then transitioning into fatherhood. I could have given myself another 10 years and it probably would have been better. But that's why I like coming from my standpoint, because I'm like, hey, man, like if you, like a lot of people don't have to go through these hard journeys before they get to their 20s and then let alone become a parent at that stage and move forward. So I know that I can speak about certain, sometimes I'm going to get these guests to speak about some aspects that I know that I was lacking in understanding. And I'm like, there's going to be a lot of people who are going to relate to this. And so, yeah, it was very important. And if I can go on and answer the question more formally, some of the more important stuff. So, like I said, I reconnected with my father because of Super Daddy Club, right? So I didn't even understand how, like, what influence I was missing by not having a father. I didn't understand that. I didn't even think that there is an actual issue with fatherlessness. And I think most of society does not understand the complexity of those dynamics and how it impacts everybody along the way. So the importance of fatherhood was such, the strongest analogy, or sorry, the strongest epiphany came when we did this um investigation with some of my peers at school that looked at how single family homes, when we look at Canada, the US, and the UK, single family homes on average at about 82.3% were headed by single mothers. Well, there's that many, like if we look at that 82.3% ratio, that means that there's 82.3% of fathers who are partially there or not there. Same thing for mothers who are lacking in that support at that percentage. Same thing for children who are lacking in that support at that percentage. And it all starts from this idea that fathers don't have that big of a role to play in this position, and society being structured in a way that reinforces that at every other point. And so, whether it is just like, what is the meaning of having a father in the life of a child? What are the contribution mean for the mother who's left there doing this by herself? Um, I mean, it just, it's a cascading effect. And when we look at the impact on mental health and everything, it becomes, to me, it's just this, um, what's the analogy when you have, I forgot the term of it, when you have, you have a string of balls and one ball is hitting the other one, and the force,
Yeah.
um,
I know
pendulum.
exactly what you're talking.
Right? It
Yeah.
has that kind of effect with things. And so, what I came to realize with Super Daddy Club is there is actually such thing as a fatherhood crisis. We could call it a family crisis. But because it is so skewed, I felt like it was appropriate to call it a fatherhood crisis, and then directly segue to single motherhood crisis. We tend to look at these issues as being separate things, and they're not separate things. They're all interconnected deeply. And what I've came to realize with our show is that we're seeing these spikes of mental health issues for young teenagers, adults, mothers, fathers, and we're treating the issue as though they're little isolated pockets, and they're not. They're really not. So that was one of the big things that I learned with Super Daddy Club. The other one was something called child alienation. Child alienation is what I was going through when I went through courts. It was an attempt of, there's people who experience child alienation to the full spectrum of it, and it's very serious. But it's when you have one parent who is trying to turn the child against the other parent when there's a formal, healthy relationship that was present. And so, because of like, I started learning about that very early, and I was able to counteract the actions and effects of it with my son to the point where he was healthy and he didn't experience um all the negative effects of it. But it's something that I learned can happen in very healthy relationship at very benign levels, to when people start having conflict and um going through separation and divorce and going through a court system, and that issue is now only exacerbated because court has a confrontational nature that pits parents against each other. And if I can put it in lighter terms, that puts people against one another with an anticipated winner and loser. And you can only imagine how that affects people's psyche when they feel like, my life is on the line. Everything is on the line. It's no longer about the best interest of the child in the eyes of the parents. It's now about, how do I come out of this victorious, which is a completely different calculus. And so, something else that I learned, uh, so was, it's the conflict that matters. When parents go into the court system, it's not how bad the other parent is. It's not how great you think you are as a parent. It's how you're navigating the level of conflict within your relationship. And that brings the um that that put the ball back in your court when you look at it that way, because now you're starting to look at, well, why am I not able to regulate my emotions in this particular situation, and what do I need to do to be able to do that? Because every time you get angry, ooh, that's not angry, ooh, he must be unstable, and now you're finding yourself in hot waters because you're reacting to things that, yes, you should be reacting to, but maybe not in that way, right? And so you start that's where self-development becomes important, and that's also a part of Super Daddy Club in reaching into all of these various component where it's important to develop yourself as an individual and go through the learning processes to become a better person, to become a more um to have more self-regulation, to have more empathy and understanding for the other side. So you're parenting and you're doing things actually in the best interest of your child. Things that I've learned. The other thing that we're learning now is the importance of um n- our decision when we come to what we consume and what we eat, and how that influences our children as well. We're seeing a spike in chronic health issues. We're seeing a spike in obesity amongst younger children, stress and anxiety. Well, if let's say my son, one time I had some road rage, and I was just about to curse at somebody, and my son was looking at me, and I could see him through the rearview mirror, right? And so if your son or your daughter is used to seeing you lash out uncontrollably, insult your partner, do these things, they take that on. However you manage stress, however you handle stress, however you handle what you eat, what you put on the table, these things pass pass these things directly down to your children. And there comes the challenge of parenting, where if y- like if if I didn't have all these tools to be able to navigate through life, and now I've got to pass them on to this kid so he or she can learn how to navigate through life, there's something there. There's something there. And that's where education becomes important, learning becomes important, self-assessment becomes important. And so there's so much stuff that I'm learning on Super Daddy Club that it's forcing me to be a better person, a better father, a better partner, because I have the knowledge, so I should know better. Um, but at least I hold myself to that standard, at least.
What I hear from all that is that there's the higher goal of breaking that cycle that you saw when you first came into Quebec City, because you'd mentioned you're in government housing, sometimes also referred to as the projects, and you see a lot of family units in there without a father around. And you saw firsthand, what does that lead to? Well, it leads to a lot of times another cycle. So trying to break that out and break that cycle, because it's not a positive cycle for a family to go
Mm-hmm.
through, or a community. And then also being able to explain to young fathers and young men these things that aren't taught in school. And sometimes, even if there's a father in the home, they're not sometimes taught, and they become very, I think, self-inflicting wounds, let's
Mm-hmm.
say, because you don't know any better, right? You don't know that, hey, if I'm in a relationship that's breaking apart, and we do have to go to court or mediation or something, if I can't regulate how frustrated I am, the stress that I'm under, if I can't do these things, to your point, that's something that another party can use against you. Plus, it's not healthy for you as well,
Mm-hmm.
right? And especially with young dads that have a desire to be a good father, a good provider, to be active in their child's life, even if they're not together with their partner, is something where I think what you're doing becomes so important, especially be able to point people back to the resources that you provide to us. I did want to touch a little bit on, it sounded like there was some reconciliation or some forgiveness, and maybe I'm reading too much into it, between you and your father as you've gotten a little bit older, as you've kind of gone down this path a little bit. And I'd love for you to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's at a very early point, I would say, because it's been a lot easier for my brother and my sister to reconnect with my father than it's been for me. They have a much better line of communication. And I wonder why. I have a couple of speculations, but I think it's just because, again, um I took on that role of that void that was created by not having a father in the house. I was the one who was the most ready to, or prone to just, I wanted to just jump right in there and just cover that gap. Like I remember there was this one time when in Quebec City, we had this one family member who came to visit us, and when she left, she gave each one of us $20. And I ran to the store with my $20 and I bought milk and um chocolate, hot chocolate, Nutella powder, whatever it was. And I brought it back home. My mom was like, "That's not your responsibility." And so, um, but that was like my mentality, right? And so when I was 19 years old, I wanted to go to university before I had a child. I was working in a warehouse because I had to go support the family when my mom found herself on her own. And that's when I never felt angry by the thought of not having a father. It never angered me, it never bothered me. I just moved on until that point, because that's when I was like, man, if like other kids, I had a father, I would have probably not have to be doing this. I could have just moved on with my life. So I don't know if I built that much resentment against my father that it was much more harder for me to establish that relationship than my sister and brother, for example. But um we had the show with Yana Herde on, and she spoke about the challenges of parents who are trying to reconnect with their young daughters. And just with everything she was saying, I felt the necessity to, again, I've been given the knowledge. I know better than my father does now, if he doesn't know. Right? And so I just felt like I had to reach out to him, and I did so. And it was actually, now that I think about it, the second time that I tried to reach out to him. The first time did not go well, and that's why Yana's knowledge was so important, because the first time he came at it from the standpoint of um like in Africa, men are still like men were here back in the 50s. They own the house, they own the family, they own the children, and there's that authority dynamic that is present. And I felt like he came forward with that kind of energy and thoughts, thinking. And so the first time that I reached out to him, it didn't work out at all. My son was about 3 months old at that point. It was just about, I started going through all the court stuff. And so it took some years after. And then after the episode, Super Daddy Club got created, the episode with Yana Herde came, and I got the knowledge. And so I reached back out to him, and now it was better. And we're able to have a little bit of an exchange. And I, to me, that was just like the first foot forward. And we need to follow up on that. We need to build up on that. And that's where we left off. And honestly, at that point, I was like, I need to maybe do more work on myself, because I do not fully understand why there's all this, like, what are all the things that are preventing me from having a proper relationship with this man? Is it distance? Is it, like, what is it? I don't fully understand it. And maybe more work needs to be done in that part. I wish I had a more, like, cool ending to it, that we're fully reconnected. We have not. And I think it's yeah, I think I need to do a little bit more work to understand that. Maybe I'm just overthinking it too much, and I just need to reconnect. Let me know your thoughts, actually. But, you know,
I did have somebody on that did work through reconciliation and something similar. Forget his name. He's somebody out of Singapore. I'll send it over to you. That's what his focus is really is reconciliation. But I think too, in coming to terms with some of the activities and some of the things that both my father and my mother had going on that I had to work past, is getting to a point where some of those thoughts don't carry the same energy. You almost become maybe a little bit more analytical about it, as far as, this is what happened. It wasn't good. They made mistakes. It did affect me, but I'm not giving that situation any more energy, and I'm going to move past it. And that only, personally, I think that only comes, one, when you're ready for it, and then two, it has to kind of come organically. You couldn't sit down like tomorrow and say, tomorrow I'm going to forgive everything that my father and I had that was not working out, and we're going to have a great relationship starting on Friday. it
Mhm,
doesn't,
mhm.
it doesn't work like that.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I did acknowledge how big of a step it was to just reach out and just establish that initial point of communication. And yeah, like specifically right now, I'm at a point where I need to build up on that. I was actually just talking about that with my brother not too long ago, where he, he told me, it's like, yeah, I was talking to dad, and I don't even call him dad. Like, it's still hard for me to use that vocabulary. And kind of surprised me that he was talking to her. And I was like, oh, you're still talking? And he's like, yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm like, okay, okay. Okay, I see. There's something there. So yeah, that's where we are exactly. We need to build up on that initial contact, and that initial contact should not be taken for granted on my part at all. No.
Yeah. Yeah. No, yeah, I think you're on a good path. And like you said, there's always knowledge, there's always things that you can learn from other people that can help you on that journey. I
Mm-hmm,
do
mm-hmm.
want to pivot over and talk to you a little bit with your work with dads and young dads in particular. Is what can older men and older fathers like myself do to help support our sons and in their journey as becoming fathers?
Yeah, and that's gonna touch base on one of the some of the cool things that we've learned in our journey on our side, but is the importance of modeling. That's the biggest thing that we lack when we don't have that influence, right? And it's from very, some of the things may seem mundane, but they're very important. Like, you learn how, where do you learn how to take care of your stuff and what you have, right? It's kind of cool to see somebody who's older taking care of their things, taking care of their relationship, their tools, their equipment. And all of these little things really matter. And so if you are in a position where you can impart that onto a younger person, let that be your child, nephew, niece, it's not a light role. It's a very important role, because we children, we look for these examples in society, and when we don't have them, we go find them elsewhere. Again, the whole thing about the projects and just this community of fatherless kids, it's where are we finding that model, right? And so being able to uh show young people what it's like to think over a and plan and strategize over a long period of time. um where do we go and learn how to keep a marriage together? Where do we learn to, like, when do men switch from, oh, I can get any girl, to I need to sit down with this one woman here and build this? And what are we building? There's one day where I actually had the epiphany driving through communities, like, man, somebody purchase this home. They have to save for it. They have to furnish it. They have to keep it together. They have to keep it in orderly fashion. And it's like, where do we go learn all of these little things about life? And it's just by observing what, um, our elders are doing, what our fathers are doing, what our mothers are doing, how they interact and how they manage their relationships. And so, I think it'll be important for, yeah, anybody older, understand the importance of your influence and your role for that young child, because they're observing, they're watching, and a lot of the things that they're going to do will be based on what they see. And so when you start looking at it that way, it gives you a greater sense of responsibility as well, right? So I think it's healthy on both ends. And so that's one of the areas where I think, um, just understanding the importance of your role and how we look at it coming from that younger perspective. And your show has really helped me put that in perspective, where because again, I don't know my father, but I also do not know my grandparents. So it was Jane Honigman who introduced us, who finally asked me, Lando, why are you in such a rush? Like, I'm 7 years old. Like, you're in your 30s. Like, you have all this time ahead of you. And I'm like, oh, I have all this time ahead of me. you know, it's just putting life in perspective in such a way. So yeah, I think that's probably one of the more important things, like the importance of modeling. Um, that should not be understated. We also had Rick Johnson on the show, who talked about how he would go into and I thought this was such an amazing um um advice, but his advice to single mothers of young men was, if you know a man in the community who is responsible, who takes care of his business, who has a good head on their shoulder. Let your child, go help them with cutting the grass. Let your child go learn from them, because they're wherever they can get that example from, or what it means to be a man, and what it means to be a father, what it means to be a grandfather. They need to see that. And I've been thinking more and more, since meeting you, Jane Honick, man, I've been thinking more about how I can impart that onto my son, because with all the court stuff, there's like several layers to it, and a lot of the family got ruptured, and so great grandfather doesn't have as much of a relationship with my son, and I need strategy to be able to reconnect the both. And whether it's hey, do you guys want to buy his school supplies, and maybe take him shopping for back to school? Do you guys want to go to Callaway Park? That's our amusement park down here. With kiddo during summertime. Can he come and can we have a fire? Anything, like any opportunity to connect, spend time, and just appreciate the little what seems mundane about the human interactions. Those are all very important things that I'm thinking around as well.
Well, and I love what you're talking about when it comes to trying to get those connections going with your sons. The one of the biggest things that I've learned doing this program is that oftentimes it's the little things that mean the most to especially children, but that they carry forward. Everybody loves going to the amusement park. Everybody loves going on vacations. Everybody loves that stuff. But when I'm talking with people about, hey, tell me a special moment you and your grandfather had. It was, fishing in the pond and just sitting there
Yeah,
with
yeah.
lines in the water, or it was going on a hike. Things that for most part, I think the grandfathers would probably think don't even remember that, but the children remember that, and that's a quality type activity. So very, very good to pick up and even talk about hey, take them shopping, take them whatever, because they could have an ice cream cone and
Mm-hmm.
have an incredible conversation,
Mm-hmm.
that you may never hear about, but your son's going to remember that for the next 30 years.
Mm-hmm. And then the thing too is, and maybe you can speak more to this than me, but after you've seen so many things in life, you're more patient. You're more patient with things, right? Um, you know, managing money over time, you hopefully become better at it
Right.
than, I'm better at it than when I was 18 years old. So hopefully we continue down that trajectory.
Yeah,
you know?
and that comes with the age. Part of it, because I think too is I think both of us are talking to people that are experts around teenagers and just our experiences. When you're younger, everything's so immediate and everything is so intense. The girl that you asked out on a date, if she says no, your whole world's destroyed, and there's no point in even next week coming. And
Mm-hmm.
then as you go older and you go through these experiences, you also realize that things take time to develop, right? So you start down a certain path, and it's like, okay, we're going to take this action, and then that action is going to lead to something else, but you're not going to see it right away. It's going to be a little bit further down the road. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I think
Mm-hmm.
to your point, as fathers get older, you start to learn those lessons a little bit more, and kids will look at you like you're strange. That you know, we here in Georgia, we've started back to school about a month or so ago, and I'm sure kids right now can't even imagine summer coming around and that they'll be out of school again.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, it's just like, oh, it's going to go on for fourth
Mm-hmm.
grade is going to go on forever. And then we just chuckle and we're like, yeah, no, it'll be over before you even realize it.
Literally, literally. It's there's also a difference in between the type of advice you're gonna get from different people, right? Where how your father may tell you how to handle a breakup, for example, will be different from how your grandfather may tell you on how to handle the breakup. And if there's a difference, you want to find out what that difference is, right? I remember when I was, yeah, right before I conceived my first child, we had a pregnancy scare with my ex. And I remember going to my mom, telling her about that pregnancy scare. And here's what my mom told me. And we got to put this in context. But my mom said, well, if you cannot handle one child at the age of 22, there's something wrong with you. And I was like, next thing you know, I have a kid because I'm like, I can do it. Now, if I was in the same shoes giving my son advice, I probably would have given him slightly different advice, and not to criticize my mom. She came from a generation where men were men at the age of 15, 16, because they're
Correct.
considered men. Women were conceiving at a much younger age, and it was not frowned upon. It was almost expected. So I got that kind of generational advice, and I applied to, modern time me, and it didn't go as well. And I'm like, well, if I had somebody else that I could go, that I, directly have that conversation with, maybe it would have been different, right? And so sometimes maybe kids are going from mom to dad to grandpa raising the same question, or grandma raising the same question. And it's because they got one answer and they're like, okay, well, let's see what mom says. Let's see. And so when it comes to it's very important to have those relationships just so you can be able to bounce ideas and just get that full perspective, that holistic perspective, we can put it that way.
Right, right. And to your point too, is that a lot of times the children know what mom or dad is going to say about a certain situation, but grandparents can be a little bit of a wild card because we do have that perspective. We also aren't there day in and day out, and so I think sometimes grandchildren might have no expectation about what we might say on something where they know dad's going to say this or
Yeah.
mom's going to say this.
And they're
And
very
then
curious about that.
they are for sure. Now, I also wanted to talk with you as we get close to wrapping up is what's the future for Super Daddy Club? What do you have on the horizon? Where do you see your roadmap, going back to your business? What's your roadmap for Super Daddy Club?
We're just breaching into a new space right now. So the future is now for us, where um we're starting to we want to create documentaries out of some of the bits of shows that we're creating, because the podcast medium moves very fast and it's always about get the next show and get it done, but I think it's important to slow down because there's so much to unpack out of every single episode that I love spending the time to do that. And so what we're starting to do here, we're working on our first mini documentary series, but we're starting to just take the time to dive deeper into topics, research them more profoundly, and create much more engaging content out of that. For example, right now our interest is just learning about the origins of the family court system, and there's a movement of people who feel as though it should be abolished or it should be reformed at least. And so we're starting to look into that. So what we're doing is multi-series on particular topic, bring different professionals from different point of view. Uh, not only are we building the one for the family court, but we're also looking at the problem of obesity from a few different angles. And so these are things to come where we're going to start trying to bring, like, let's say 4 different perspective on a single topic so we can have a better understanding at it. And I think that's a great way to cut through the information overload with more information, but at least it's provided in a way where you can get this side of the information, and then what do these people think about it? What do these people think about it? And then make up your own opinion and make up your own thoughts and make better decision, hopefully, or more informed decision with that much more knowledge. So that's what we're working on in the process right now. In the future of this, I would love to have I'm trying to figure out how can I get people's input directly on the show. So what we're also doing is we're moving towards a live platform, and I want people to be able to call into the show and address their problems, and so we can have panels of some of the experts and whatnot who come onto our show to come and actually answer questions from the public as we go on, because I think that's something that's missing in the media sphere right now, and that was more prevalent back then. So Super Daddy Club is it's it is constantly evolving, and I can't, like I say, we started thought by with the idea that, oh, we're going to talk about navigating the family court system. We've only done 3 out of 30 something episodes on navigating the family court system. It becomes much more about giving people the tools to be able to not find themselves in those situations in the first place, if anything. And so just stay in tune with us, because we are evolving and we're thinking of the better ways to improve this and improve what we're bringing to the people. And so, yeah, the future is definitely now for us. And I think a lot is going to come out of being able to unpack these episodes more and dissect them and dive deeper into it, and also engage the public into the discourse of what we're doing some more. So that's what's in the future of Super Daddy Club.
Oh, that's awesome. And how can people best get in contact with you and maybe even join the newsletters and things that you have?
Yeah, follow us on at Super Daddy Club on Instagram. Our website is superdaddyclub.ca. On there, you'll find all the links to reach out to us. You can also find all the resources from the guests who come onto our show. Or hey at 14studios.ca if you want to email us personally. We always respond within 24 hours. Yeah, so that would be the best way to reach out to us.
Oh, I love it. I love it. And Lendo, is there anything about Super Daddy Club or anything about being a young father that I haven't asked you that you would like to bring up?
We've covered a lot of grounds, and I'd like for people to just, if we link to the show the report of the Surgeon General, I think that'll be really, really helpful, because, again, that report coming from such an authority is very important. And even for us during Super Daddy Club, there's been a lot of moments of doubt as to whether what we're doing is actually important for people, whether it's actually necessary, whether it's really helpful. And it's like you said earlier, where not every show is going to be for everybody, but there's going to be something for, everybody eventually on there, right? And so, what the report of the Surgeon General does is just highlight how important this is, the isolation, the financial strains that people are going through, all of the hardships that people are experiencing right now. And just in terms of validation, I think it's important for people to understand that, hey, um, the journey you're on is already hard enough, and the social pressures that are present today are real. It's not because you're failing, it's not because you're incapable, it's because the social pressures are real and they're felt by people throughout. Family is super duper important, and if you can reach out to any degree of help, do so. There's a thing about society today where we think we have to do it all on our own. And back then, it wasn't like that. Back then, that was not the notion. It was people were there, the community was there. Like, people had bigger family, people had more help. And there's nothing wrong with going back towards some of that. The ancient knowledge and this ancient way of doing things was not all crazy. So yeah, if I can add that, yeah, that's what I'll add. That's what I'll add.
Well said. And folks, this report from the U.S. Surgeon General is one that had come out, I think, at this point. This is first part of October. Came out, I think, in September, and this deals specifically with the stress that parents are, both financial and isolation, all sorts of things going on, and really helpful for older parents to go in and read this and realize that some of the stresses that families are under are the same stresses that families have always been under, but there are new unique stresses going on with parents at this point that can really impact the family and will impact mothers and dads. differently. And so we all need to kind of put our arms around these young families, and we need to make sure that they get the support they need. So I'll put a link to that study as well into the show notes for this one, as well as your website and how people can get in touch with you.
Yeah, and to that report again, in there, it's when I was talking about stress, parents reporting experiencing more stress and anxiety. I think they put the number, the percentage up to like 77% or something like that of single parent or something are experiencing more anxiety. It's in there, but um, we do have that report, that investigative research that we did onto our website, which showed that statistics of 82.3% of single parents home being led by mothers, 77%, 82% on average. I keep getting those numbers. They're all around the same ballpark in terms of in the high 70s, 80s, and there's a connection there. So there is something there. And yeah, the link for people will be great for that.
No, absolutely. And Lendo, thank you so much for being on the Cool Grandpa podcast. I really have enjoyed having this conversation with you.
No, thank you for having me on. It was a pleasure.
All right, cool kids. I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Lendo as much as I did. I really enjoyed learning more about his background, what led him to start Super Daddy Club, as well as understanding even some of the challenges and some of the successes that he's had as a young man who's starting on his own path to really lend a hand and help other people that might be coming behind him. Now, I've got links to some of the different podcasts that we've talked about, as well as links to Super Daddy Club in the show notes, as well as in the description if you happen to be watching this on YouTube. So be sure to check those out. Be sure to share this information with those in your network that could really use this information. I want to make sure that all the young fathers out there have what they need to be successful young men, because at the end of the day, those successful young men end up becoming successful grandfathers. And that's what we really want. So I hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. And until next time, remember to stay cool.